and welcome to today's session of the Natural Birth Summit. Today we're going to be talking about recording your birth, and for this session we have Kirstie Perez. And welcome, Kirstie. Kirstie has been since 2013 capturing amazing imagery of birth. Kirstie's also a doula, and her passion is empowering women with the knowledge and confidence to be able to make their own decisions and to feel the strength to be able to assert for themselves in all times in the birth process. Kirstie, tell me a little about the journey you've been on through the photography and being a doula.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time and this platform to reach whoever this is supposed to resonate with. I'm sure it'll reach whoever it's supposed to. So just thank you for your time and for asking me to speak today. To answer your question, birth kind of fell into my lap. I was simply asked by a client in 2013 if I would photograph her birth. And at the time, I had never done anything. And where I'm from, it was, we'll just say taboo was the nicest word we could have for it. So it was taboo. And I just said yes. So I immediately fell in love with it. And at the time, I actually didn't want children. So I was in it solely for women. Babies were just a beautiful perk because they're beautiful souls. But the entire journey that started was women focused for me. So after my first birth, I just kind of got the hang of it and I fell in love with it. And seeing the internal process of the birth world, just kind of like everybody else, I had really only seen, if you don't have sisters or moms or that kind of woman tribe around you that so many people are fortunate to have, you get to see birth on like a sitcom where people are just kind of like having birth and then boom, baby's there. So you really don't know what happens. So when I was in that world, that first birth, it was just kind of like the stars aligned. I don't know how else to say it. It was just kind of meant to be. And I just kind of haven't stopped since. And it went from birth photography to sharing it online, which 10 years ago, it was deemed, unfortunately, pornography. And so women couldn't even see any type of representation of themselves other than maybe a science book. We've come a long way for this to be online and accessible for women to even have any slight representation of themselves. So that's how it turned into the advocacy, because you're starting to see how the pictures highlighted it, but then they also exposed a lot of what these women go through that we just simply don't talk about. And that's kind of where it turned into the doula work. And COVID kind of forced that doula part of me because you had to be certified to be in the rooms in the United States. So it just kind of went from there, and that's where we are now. And so now I do both. They call it a doula-tog, half doula, half photographer. So
doula-tog, that's a new one to me. Okay.
Well, I don't know if it's a real word, but like it's kind of like one of those words you just kind of mash it together.
That's fine. That's all right. The language is always evolving. It's fine.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So can we start by talking about why is it that women and their families, why do they want to record their births? What are their objectives?
I will preface most of the questions like this for everyone is they have their own ideology about how they want their births to go. So there's a plethora of reasons why women want to record. The main one is obviously to document, right? We're always documenting, having our phones in our hand. We see images every day. We're never really not documenting whether we're consuming it with our eyes or taking it with our hands. So the thing with the birth world is that it can be such a transformative space, and it can either be transformative, whether it could be traumatic or it can be fast. Birth is like the Wild West. You know, you can make all the plans in the world, but baby's ultimately in charge. So I think that a lot of women want that to connect with that part of themselves, because when you're in the middle of labor, you're not paying attention to anything. You're trying to get through it. It's labor, it's work. So the photography, I really have noticed, especially over the last few years, women are starting to understand that it's not just for like a shock factor or to be dramatic about it. It's quite literally a transformative part in a woman's life where she can look through it through another lens to connect to it emotionally, because we are being taken care of medically to some degrees. Some care is better than most, but there's really not an emotional aspect to help women process the literal trauma that her and her baby or babies go through. It's kind of like, okay, we're so glad you're here. You both made it, go home. To me, that's just not really logical long term. So, and when you go through something like that, you're just kind of like a number in the pipeline because there's 10 other women behind you giving birth in the other suites. So you can kind of feel dismissed. And I think that these photos help put the pieces together for whoever is giving birth to understand what not only happened, but also to be kind of present with it, because you're in it when you're giving birth, but you're not paying attention. So you don't know how powerful you look. You just feel pain, or you feel, some people feel euphoria. So the spectrum is vast on why people record, but the main reason is, I think, for connection, to try to understand what happened after the fact, because it can be it's so unpredictable. So I
really like,
yeah.
Sorry, I really like what you said about women don't realize how powerful they look in labor and birth.
Right.
Because they're in it and they're doing the work. And that's really resonates with a lot of things that we hear. Can you tell me about video versus still photograph images? What would you say about how those help, or someone should prioritize whether they want still images or video?
So that is another question that I was going to say is more like subjective to the person. So it really depends on what the person wants. Video, you're just going to get, I mean, my personal opinion with just movies in general, somebody can be just as moved by a little piece of cinema as one photo. So it could have the same effect on the person. It just depends on what that person wants. I will say the video, I think, is a little bit obviously more interactive, because you remember going through the movements, and then if you're being recorded going through the movements, you can kind of make that connection again in a more physical way. So seeing something with your eyes visually, I think it has the same effect. It really just depends on what the client wants. Some people know exactly that they want photography or videography, and some people want both. So it just depends on what the client wants. Personally, I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I think because they're both documenting, it's kind of like, you're on the same highway with different cars. It's the same event that's being recorded. It's just a different viewpoint or a vantage point.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. And what are the key challenges that families face when they're thinking about having recordings or making their own recordings or having recordings made by a professional for their birth?
So this is actually a really good question, because if you went to my website and you looked, like when I have new clients that are inquiring, a lot of them think that because you record means you have to post. And that's not really true. Your birth, and I want to say this for anyone shopping for a birth photographer. I really hope that that you can shop your photographers as you would do your OBGYNs. You need to see how they are about consent. You need to see how they are about rolling consent, which means if you say yes one time, you can say no later. Mm-hmm. So, and your birth isn't to be exploited. Now, if you want to share your birth, that's different. But that kind of goes along the lines of, I guess, choosing and trying to decide which one's best for you. It's not necessarily just the final product you should focus on. It's connecting with the person, read the reviews. And just because the reviews are glowing, and I say this about me, I have turned people away where I knew we weren't going to be a fit. I've had people not go with me before, and that's okay. You want to attract the people that are meant for you, especially in a space so sacred as birth, because you really get one shot to kind of like try to make it as good as you can. So having someone just show up is great in theory, but will they meet you for coffee? Because you don't want your first time to meet them, when you're in the middle of labor, and you could be, it could be a precipitous birth, and you're just, it's go time, and you're not prepared for it. So a lot of the prep work, I think, supersedes the final result, because I think that's how you get a good final result. It's more than just someone's artistry. It's your body. It's your story. It's your child. It's your partner. Whoever your partner is with is going to be okay with sharing this. So it sounds dramatic, but birth kind of is. So I mean, it's a big deal.
Yes.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's partly. I think I was also wanting to talk a bit about the technical challenges of capturing images in a birth environment as well.
Oh, okay. So like lighting would be like a number one thing. At the end of the day, we're still mammals. So like we give typically birth at night. Statistically, birth happens at night. Kind of like when you went to bed, you had like a cat and all of a sudden you woke up and there was a litter of kittens under your bed. A lot of birth happens in the dark because our bodies settle down, melatonin sets in, you're calm. So people think that it's just going to happen in the middle of the day. Statistically speaking, it happens when the sun goes down, usually, not always. And so getting good lighting is good. Having backup batteries is a must. I don't care how good your battery is. A lot of things can pull energy from your battery, and there could be interference with other technical, especially in a hospital with all the, what's it called? All the frequencies going on. Like
all the electrical systems.
Yes, it could really, and it hasn't happened to me before, but I have heard it happen before. And I would advise getting a backup camera. So just kind of like covering your bases, because the last thing you want to have is you're in the middle of a birth and your camera dies and you've got a fleeting moment right in front of you when you could just have something right next to you just in case. So the lighting for sure is the number one thing. And if the lighting's not good, then getting an external flash to put on top of whatever camera you're using. And even if it's a phone, you can buy a ring light and have that lighting on there. So they have the little attachable ring lights that are actually pretty bright. So the lighting would be the number one thing for sure.
And can you go into a bit more depth there about how you get the lighting required for good images without being intrusive to the mother?
So the job of the observer, so the photographer, whether it's a photographer or a videographer, your job, if you're not a doula, like if you're just doing the photography aspect, your job is to be a fly on the wall. So you don't really my job is to not interact or manipulate the birth in any way, shape, or form. It's to just be a fly on the wall. So you kind of have to, I would think that the hard stuff that come with that is the emotional aspect. The first couple of births I did, I was sobbing in the background. Like it was highly charged and emotional. Luckily, I wasn't like recording anything on the phone, but like my hands were shaky because I was so emotional about it. So the emotional aspect to keep it in check, that definitely affects your focus. So I would just kind of pre-warn people to be like, it's okay if you get emotional about it, but just remember to focus on what you're doing, because you don't get that moment back. It's not like a wedding where you can go find, grandma to get that photo again. Like, well, we'll just go find her. We'll do it later. You literally have one shot.
That's an interesting
focus.
Yeah, I understand. And that's an interesting, makes it particularly challenging to record a birth in which you're a stakeholder, so a partner or a parent or a sibling recording the birth. For that detachment is impossible, isn't it?
That is the word. And it really is. And you don't know how you're going to react. People talk a lot about fight or flight situations, and you wouldn't think about fight or flight in a birth, but really when you see someone born, if you've never seen that before, you really don't know how you're going to act. I mean, you just don't. And some people, and it's never going to be like anything violent or anything like that, but it's just like the emotional reactivity. It's natural. You're in the presence of something very beautiful. So you kind of have to like rein it in and not interfere, because it's that little moment that you can accidentally take away the focus by making it about you, by simply expressing yourself. So it really is a level of professionalism that it's kind of tricky, and I'm used to it now, but there are still some births that get me, and I'm just like in the corner, like covering my mouth, just because it's so raw and so emotional, so beautiful. And it's just letting them have their moment. Not interjecting, not saying anything. And another thing too, in a hospital, people don't think about this, but when babies are born, they exclaim, "Oh, it's a girl." Like, some moms they made that baby. They want, especially the ones that don't want to know the gender, they should be able to see what the gender of the baby is so that they can have that moment. And you wouldn't even think about taking that moment from someone by simply exclaiming something like that. So it's those little things that give the mom so much more power, because she's powerless at that point. She's at the mercy of her body and the room around her. Her being able to know the sex of her baby, or at least not even, they can know it, but like, let her see it. Let her find out her baby. Because then, like I said, like the mammal part of us, where we're still very much primal, and we get in that state, those are such important cues to have that are beyond it. It's all encompassing. It's really beautiful. I know that it sounds dramatic, but it does make the shot, because if you're intervening with that, then it takes away from the organic moment that mom is either paying you for or counting on you to capture for her. So it's a very selfless, it's a high risk, high reward environment, but it requires complete selflessness for it to go accordingly, for it to go for the best way for mom.
That's really,
I hope that makes sense.
No, that really does make sense. That's really helpful. Fantastic. Could we talk now about specifically about having or recording and having a professional come with you into a hospital? You mentioned challenges around when in the COVID period about being allowed into hospital. If you could expand on that, that would be great.
Expand. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Expand on what is specifics about capturing and recording in a hospital environment.
Oh, yes. So there's a lot of rules and regulations depending on where you're birthing, whether you're birthing at a birthing center or you're birthing at a hospital. Hospitals have policies. So no photographer is above the policies. And if you try to make yourself above a policy, you're giving yourself a problem that does not need to be had. There are ways to talk to people and get what you want. And that's not manipulative. It's just, if you know what you want, there's ways to get it. So, and a lot of it boils down to respect. Because if I'm so I'm a professional photographer, right? I'm fully aware, and that this is where the ego check kind of comes in with birth, like any kind of artist you work with, because any type of ego that can interfere with someone's birth like this is where the photography aspect, where you're shopping for a photographer, this is what matters, because this is where their values come in and how much they're going to put you before themselves. So I've been in situations where doctors have said, no, they can't have a photographer in the room. And when that first happened, I then realized, I should have told my client to inform. I had assumed that she had told her doctor that I was going to be there. So when I show up, I now have an issue where this doctor is not okay with me being in the room. Again, boils down to common courtesy and respect, just some basic home training. Like I'm given free game here. Like, it's just talking to somebody as an equal or respect, because a lot of them want to make their clients and their patients happy. But they also are protecting themselves too. So lots of doctors don't like cameras in their faces when they're working. So there's ways to respect the birth environment, and you can have conversations with them and explain, because in the hospitals, usually I'm behind the patient. They very rarely let you come in front and focus on what they're doing, because again, doctors don't want to be recorded for liability reasons. That's just a fact. It's not personal, it's business. So that's where you have to realize, though, when you're up against that, the more of a relationship you have with your doctor, the easier you'll be able to get what you want and understand if they respect what you want. Because another thing too is, if a doctor's not okay with being recorded, other than liability, that should be a red flag to that person that they're not comfortable. Because if they're doing a good job, if they have glowing reviews, it really does weed out who would be good for you. Because very rarely am I told no. And it is because of the policies and stuff. I understand the rules, but a lot of doctors want to work with their patients. You just have to, it's a relationship. So okay. I would say that if you're wanting that, make sure you talk with your provider. And if they're okay with it, great. If they're not okay with it and you're okay that they're not okay with it, fine. But if that bothers you, listen to that. Because there's a lot of people who would love for you to record their birth, because not only is it good for you and them, it's also free promotion for their line of work. So it's a win-win for everybody in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because what I'm hearing you saying is that asking the question of your provider about capturing images and video helps you to gauge that provider's approach and openness to working
Correct.
with you in your birth. Okay, that's fantastic.
And it's a level of confidence as well, because and it's not to bash doctors. If somebody doesn't want to be recorded, by all means, they don't have to be, and they deserve the respect too. If they don't want a camera in their face in their job, then that's simply, to me, not a match. It doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing. It's like, okay, that's the information we're looking for. I now have that information. Now I can make my own decision. Because you don't want to figure this out when you're walking into the birth room and all of a sudden your doctor is like, no, you can't have this and you're in labor. Now you're pissed. And it doesn't work out for anybody. So it's kind of like that. Things roll downhill.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah. So it's adding that to the list of things to get clear on before you walk in labor, because if your choices aren't allowed and you find that out in labor,
right,
that makes things more difficult.
And it does. And it not only stresses out the mom, it stresses out the partner, it stresses out whoever's involved. And it's just not necessary. But a lot of times people aren't aware that they can just say no. Like they can go find somewhere else. It's not always ideal. It's annoying to find a new provider. I understand. I switched mine at 30 weeks and that was not a part of the plan, but I did it. And it's because I had information. Women shared their stories with me. I didn't know that I could say no because I was only doing the birth side. I didn't have a child yet. So I didn't understand the relationship aspect with OBGYNs. I thought that what they said was law. So I was very unaware, even being in the birth world and knowing as much as I did, I really realized that I really didn't know much. So I've learned a lot with that.
And so that change you made at 30 weeks, change of provider, that was that turned out well. That was a good decision.
It did turn out well. It turned out well for my level of comfort. I had some issues in pregnancy that could be arguably disputed as neglectful. So I just didn't have the patience or the want to fight this provider when I could simply just walk away because I'm in charge. And so that's the confidence that comes from that. And that's what women need. Because if there's no partner in the room and we're very vulnerable during this time, we can be easily manipulated. It's just that true. We are growing a person. So if you don't have an advocate or a doula or your partner, has to work, knowing these things that you can just say no, that is worth its weight in gold. And that also helps with the birth imagery, because if you're not comfortable with your provider, you are not comfortable in these photos. And birth is already uncomfortable enough. So you don't need to add any more pressure to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Tell me a bit about, in terms of the home birth environment, what are the things that mothers and families should think about when they're thinking about recording at home?
So again, the number one thing I'm always going to say is lighting, especially with low light situations. You could get a low light camera and a regular camera, and a quick Google search will help you decipher what's the difference. Clear spaces. So if you have a small space, I've had clients deliver in apartments. They had very small spaces, and they had a birth pool right in the middle, of their living space. So what I would say for the aesthetic look that I know a lot of women want, just clean. You don't have to clean your whole house for this. Just clean that one area that you know is going to be photographed. That will give you the cleanliness in the background and the less cluttered look that I know a lot of women would like to have for the aesthetically pleasing photos. So just kind of almost like nesting, which, usually women are all nesting. So the area that they're giving birth is very clean, but considered clutter. So like dirty clothes in the corner, which we all have dirty clothes, like it's life. But I'm just saying, like, just the aspect of that, just kind of moving and making way for that space is right below lighting, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And how does having a birth pool affect the recording of a birth?
It makes it magic. I don't care what anybody says. It just does. There's something about birth pools and how they can just kind of pop up anywhere. It doesn't have, because birth centers are beautiful too, but you're stationed to a spot, right? So birth pools, they're a little bit more fluid. So I've had people use birth pools outside. I've had them use them inside, on patio decks. I mean, just to get that aesthetically pleasing look that they want. I don't think it affects the photography in a negative way at all. If anything, they're usually really colorful, so they add a pop of color to the photos too, which is always like a statement piece in the middle of the photo. It really looks pretty.
Okay, fantastic. What could you share in terms of things that families, mothers have asked for that you've wanted to ask them to reconsider when they're thinking about recording births?
I don't think there's anything I've ever said for them to reconsider. The only thing that, and again, it goes back to the external factors. So if I'm a doula, let's say I'm a doula, because if I'm just a photographer, I'm not giving any advice like that because that's not what I'm hired for. So there are boundaries that I have to respect. Despite my wants to go in there and help them, sometimes people don't need my help. So I'm just there to observe. So what I would say is it would go back to the provider aspect, because again, if they're not comfortable back there, then when I'm coming to document, we're dealing with the energy from that. So whether it's contention or racism, or it can go. The spectrum is broad. So I would just say it's not really the birth that's the moment. It's everything kind of going up to it to get that birth as easily as possible and as beautiful as possible. So if anything, reconsidering it would just be, if you're uncomfortable, don't ignore that.
Right.
That's everything.
Yeah.
We can make a spot pretty with pretty birth pools like that. That's easy. That's easy to fix. What's not easy to fix is a connection with somebody that you're not connecting with. So that's
really powerful.
For the photos.
Yeah. So you've talked about the connection with the photographer, the connection with the provider. So really, from your perspective, it's the connection and the creation of great connection that makes everything go better, but also the outcomes of the recording go better.
Absolutely. It's a well-oiled machine. If one piece is not working, that's kind of like where the whole thing with the doula aspect, where it's like the cascade effect of a cesarean, how it starts statistically, like with high levels of Pitocin, interventions, like I said, I did say this earlier, but most interventions roll downhill, as in like, you don't usually just get one. So it's usually like one thing is doing this. Well, the side effects are doing this. And now we've got to combat these side effects. So you've got this whole issue here, or this whole scenario where it probably didn't have to happen a certain way. But if you just had the information, or just knew that if you feel off, it's very important to follow that.
Yeah.
Because the images that you want rely on how you feel.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, tell us a bit more about the work you do as a doula and how that relates to the work you do as a photographer.
I think now they're pretty symbiotic for me because I've been doing it for so long. I wouldn't have called myself a doula before COVID. Before doula was a thing, women just did this. It was in the villages, our ancestors, we didn't need certifications. We just kind of, which I understand now, obviously there's medical things that are important, but to be emotionally supportive, that's a natural thing for people to do for one another if they allow themselves to. So it ties in with the photography, because when I was doing photography first, usually I was the only one in the room with my client and her partner. Right. So when there was no doula, and because I had the knowledge that I had, my decision to extend compassion was a natural one. If someone's in front of me and they're hurting and pain, I'm not just going to ignore them. So being behind the camera allowed me access into that space, and where I'm supposed to be a fly on the wall, she's now asking me for support because she needs it. And so I had the choice to be like, okay or no. So I'm not going to tell my moms no. That's the thing. Like, I'm just not going to tell them no. Whatever they want, they're going to get. So it was a natural process. I think that, like I said, symbiotic, kind of like if you're there for a friend at a birthday party, you take out your phone and you take a photo, you're a photographer right there. So it's just a matter of metrics, is the professionalism. So yeah. It's really, really just being present with another person and holding space for their experience. And that's really all encompassing with photography. I'm collecting it with a camera, but my emotions as a doula are there supporting her and her needs and the support of her family. Sometimes dad is, having a hard time, or, mom's having a hard time. I have families that come from countless different backgrounds and relationship connections. It's all beautifully complex. So, but it all ties together. And I know that these are very broad answers to your questions, but I promise you they make or break the difference in the recording process and the final product.
I think those are really great insights that can help.
There's a lot of nuance in birth. It's not just pathology. Like we are not numbers on a piece of paper. And these real life women go home with these real life babies to their real life families from this real life trauma. So, and the trauma doesn't always have to be, dramatic. It can just be, you gave birth to somebody. So it's a lot. And so when you're recording that and having the doula aspect, it's kind of natural to just kind of be there for somebody. Now, if I'm being hired as a doula, I do more of the doula work, and then I do the photography almost second.
Okay.
So there's kind of like, you have to gauge each client, and each client's different. And then sometimes clients change their mind. All of a sudden they'll want birth photography instead of videography. So it's just, women are just as beautifully complex as birth is, and they can be. So that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I imagine with the doula work, you get to know the women better before the birth event. And so that's helpful for both of you, isn't it?
Yes. So the doula aspect, I will say, is way more, first of all, birth is intimate. Even when you're with a camera, you're photographing in an area that's very private. And that's just an area of life. Birth is very private. But that's almost an eagle eye view. It has a measured distance to where I'm not emotionally involved. It doesn't mean that I'm cold. It's just, they didn't ask me to help them here. So when I'm hired as a doula, that's whenever I'm invited into that space. I'm not entitled to that space. So whether this family, I have some families that are all encompassing, I talk to them nonstop throughout their pregnancy, and I have regulars that I'll just see them a couple times during their pregnancy and they've got it and they're fine. So it's a lot of personalities too. But on the doula aspect, you're going in the home, you're going there when mom's home after the baby's born. You're seeing a family in their most raw state. Everything has changed. Energy levels are all over the place. So you kind of come in and your job is to be a balm. Not a bomb as in BOMB, BALM. You're trying to help soothe the situation, a balming, a calming presence to help this family just kind of transition. That's really it is. It's a transitional phase. And we're trying to make it as smooth as possible. That's the job.
That's fantastic. I think that the way that you talk about boundaries and how sensitively tuned in you are to how that helps the mother in her time of great effort and need.
Right.
That's fantastic. I can see that that's something you thought a lot about. And the doula thing, I think, has brought a new dimension to the way you think about these things, is what I'm hearing. Yeah. Fantastic.
It's very humbling is not the right word. It's very it's a great deal of responsibility. And so when you look at it through that lens, it's not a job, because these are real people, and the ramifications of people being dismissed and unheard have farther consequences than just being present for someone and just holding that space for them, whether it's with a camera where they could look at it through photos years down in, or some of them just hire me as a doula. Some of them don't. A lot of women don't want their births photographed, and that's okay, but they still want that support. Everyone wants support. That's what we're all wanting in this life, is just to be supported. And whether it's through cameras, videography, a great doula, or a great obstetrician, whoever it is, that makes or breaks how someone feels about their birth. And that's ultimately why we're all here, is to help give options and just, extend this this knowledge base for women, because, half the population is doing this every second of every day. So it's not something that, we occasionally go through. As a collective, we're all a part of this.
Agreed. I really love the way you talk about serving women, and that's the sense I get. You say it's not a job. You're talking about, it's almost a duty. Duty's the wrong word, but it's service, isn't it?
It is. It's anything service oriented with women, like that. That genuinely, it always has been. Whether it was helping friends growing up, or being the eldest daughter in a family, you name it. Like, it's just kind of, like I said, I think that's more of a personality thing, which is why you should shop your photographers. If you're not doing it yourself, that's part of hiring someone. You're hiring a personality, whether you know it or not. And you don't think it's a big deal, but it's okay. And again, it's okay if you're not a match. Adults are capable of being disappointed. If it's not a match, it's okay. But a lot of women don't know that it's okay. And here in this United States, if you go against certain ideologies in the medical field, you got to kind of use some finesse to get what you want, and to kind of just connect with doctors, because even doctors, they're not all villains either. They're taught a certain way as well. There's just a certain level of disconnect that isn't necessary, and it causes a lot of this disconnection with how women process their birth. So that's where photos come in and can kind of link that to them. It's almost like a gift, because when you're in it, your eyes are closed, you're focused, it's labor, it's work. I've been at births that were 30 hours long. Like, it just depends on the birth and the woman. So it's, and then also with our counterparts too, like in the United States, women like me, women of color, we have some serious issues with how we do our maternal health care. And women of color, unfortunately, the odds are 4 times stacked against us, to where we don't make it home a lot of the time. And sometimes that could have just come from an advocate. And if you can't afford a doula, having a bestie that is obsessed with like getting information and helping you out, or even your partner, is the best thing that you can do. And also doing your own photography at your own births, whether it's a home birth or a water birth. You can you have the ability to get this information. You just have to seek it out. So I wish that this was readily available. And I guess that's why we're doing this, so that we can make it for them. But this is a really good thing for them to understand, that they can say no, and they can make different choices.
Right. Absolutely.
That better suit them.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Okay. I'd like to hear about a birth at which you were recording that is particularly memorable to you, for any reason you choose. If you'd like to share, obviously discreetly, a particular birth story.
Okay, I think one of my most favorite ones is my client had, she actually now, I think she has about 10 children now. And the way that she had a tribe, she had a village, right? So it was one of those births where despite what society says a family should look like, this was one of those ones. And I'm very grateful. I sent very clear intentions to attract the kind of clientele that I need, and the kind of clientele that need me. I don't just take anybody and everybody. And it's not a snob thing. It's just like, I want them to have the best. And if I'm not a fit, it's all right. And I can help them find somebody else who would work better for them. I want them to have that. But I know enough, and have to be responsible enough for the knowledge I know, that if I know we're not going to be a match for whatever reason, it's my responsibility to help them go to a different way. And you can handle rejection without it being hurtful. It can just be like, hey, this is where we should go. And I think you would actually click better with this person. So I say that because at this birth, that's how I found her. And she was one of my first clients to have multiples. I have one that has 10 kids and one that she's about to have 7. She's due in a few weeks. And it's just the way that these women have give birth. First of all, they're both in birth pools. So I'm convinced that just the buoyancy takes so much weight off of our bodies. So buoyancy in general, to have contractions where you're kind of a little bit weightless, that's going to make any mom feel happy. And so she was able to give birth in her home, and her kids came home from school. And the kids, they didn't shelter the kids away from at either one of these births. The kids were not only involved, but they knew what to do. They knew what a placenta was. Some of them were grossed out and screamed out because it is an organ. Like, let's be real, it can be kind of scary. But kids had such a want to learn where their new sibling came from, and their parents this is kind of the empowerment part. They just really let their kids in on what was going on. There wasn't the whole, twilight birth situation where they're just knocking us out and we wake up with the baby having no idea what happened to us.
Right.
So I liked that
that engagement with the whole family.
Right. They didn't make it pretty. They didn't make their mother strong in a way that didn't make her strong. Like, she was strong in what she did, and they just let her as raw as she was. I mean, literally, she gave birth and they came home. So we were still cleaning up. The cord hadn't been cut yet. It was like right on time. And I had never seen that. I had seen that in a hospital, but to be in someone's home, that was a really life-changing moment, because that also helped me see how kids, we really don't give them enough credit. Not only are they intelligent and incredibly intuitive, their eagerness to either help or learn, that right there is worth its weight in gold. That's a little generation that's gonna, if they're ever around birth or women, they just know the sensitivity that comes with it, just exposure. And it doesn't have to be inappropriate or anything like that, whatever that means in birth. But I mean, like, inappropriate as in they're not allowed in here if they want to be. Now, a mom can say no, but this particular birth scene with these two families, their kids are always involved, and it's not a thing to them. They're literally just embracing a new family member, and they all they want to help. So it kind of just goes to show that it doesn't have to be so dramatic. A lot of it's natural. There's a lot of interventions that prevent this connection because we're trying to control so many factors, which understandably things can happen. But those births are always the coolest because there's so much going on and it's fluid. It's not chaos.
Right.
It's really cool to see. And you can see them there's tons of talented birth photographers. If you look at their content with that, whenever they see undisturbed, is what they call it, undisturbed births, where moms take their babies and they're not taken from them, like just give it a minute. Like it's okay. Like let them have that skin to skin, because what they're doing is when you separate baby that way, that skin to skin helps regulate blood temperature, blood heart rate. Like there's a system here that works. And so the kids know not to intervene with it. If anything, they aid it. So that was really cool to see, because you don't see that in hospitals. Kids, they can't do that. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. That is really beautiful. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. We're going to start wrapping up here. And what I wanted to do was ask you about things that people can do next if they'd like to know more about you, and the things that the energy you have around this area. So what's the best thing for people to do if they'd like to know more?
So if you want to learn more about what I offer as services, you can go to my website at kpphotoinc.com, kpphotoinc.com. And but my Instagram is the same handle, so KPP Photo Inc. And you can actually see a lot more. I post a lot more educational pieces on my Instagram. So if people don't like blog form, because I have a blog on my website where I pretty much copy and paste the same information, but some people like to read in a different format. But my Instagram has a lot more information and links to other birth professionals. And I actually have I had a client, her birth went viral, and I reached the UK first. And so I actually have a lot of UK followers on my thing, not all of them in the United States. So there's resources there too for people who are looking for birth professionals in their area. I know people in Australia, there's a huge network of us that are everywhere. So the Instagram would be the easiest way.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Kirstie. Okay, this has been really great to talk to you. I could we could keep talking all day about this, and I'm just fascinated about the things you said about serving women, about that fine-tuned thinking about whether you're comfortable, uncomfortable, and what the boundaries are between the mother and the partner and doula and photographer, the people in the room, the participants, all there to serve the woman.
Because it affects everybody. Everybody's a player.
Yeah.
And by the way, the role of the doula, just to reiterate, because this is the common question that I get, and forgive me if I'm taking up too much time, but I think this is important. If you have a doula, it does not cancel out your birth partner. So a lot of people think, and especially men, I actually prefer when my clients bring specifically men to, if they're with a man and they bring them to the consult, I really want to give them a shot to connect to, because at the end of the day, that's their partner and their baby. So their job is to protect their partner. I don't want to be meeting them as if they're just hiring me as a photographer. I should not be meeting them for the first time when it's go time and we're rushing. Because they're looking at me like, who's the person with the camera pointed at my baby? So, and it gives them an opportunity to be hands-on and to learn. My job is to help their situation, not take over and control it. So if dad or, mom or who, and some people don't have romantic partners. Some people have family members that are there with them. So whoever is the person's support partner, my job is not to cancel them out or rob them of their job to help. It's to help them out. So if you have a doula, it doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't have to do anything. No, we really encourage everyone to participate. That way she feels fully supported, because when I leave, I want the energy to still stay there with them. And if dad just has questions and he doesn't know, because there was a time where you all just sat out in the waiting room and had a sandwich. You know what I mean? So there's a lot more, and that robbed you guys of being connected to your birth, because it's also yours. It is her body and all that stuff, but it's also your baby. And if you could be involved in that, that's better than a doula. That's what the doula is for, is to help with that.
Yeah, so hiring professionals, whether it's for photography or for doula help, those things are not substitutes for engagement of the wider family, and that's partner, children, parents, siblings, friends, besties, as you were saying. Right. These are not substitutes. It's not or.
It is very much. It is. That's a really good way to put it. It's an and.
Right.
And if for whatever reason the woman is in a situation, or whoever is giving birth is in a situation to where it's not always medical. Sometimes there's things happening at home where they don't feel supported. Then that's where the doula can come in. But guys, we want men to understand, especially that they're an integral part, and if they can tap into their empathy and learn, that's magic in itself. And the doula's role, like my job isn't to come over and take over, like if we're in a position where mom is stuck and she needs like hip squeezes, I will literally tell the birth partner to come over and I will show them how to do it so that they can connect and have that moment. It's not about me. It's not about the doula. Right. So that's where the fly on the wall, you have to be highly adaptable. So that's a big thing to it, but it's not a substitute. That's the biggest thing I wanted to say.
Right. I mean, as you say, particularly because at some point the professional leaves the room and the family are a unit, and we're talking about the best start in life for a new baby and for the parents.
Yeah, we're trying to leave the energy uplifting, not awkward when we leave. Right. Because then nobody wins. Right. We want mom to be happy and baby to be happy, and ultimately, trickle down effects, keep the matriarch happy. Because she's the one who nourishes it all. So it's really powerful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Kirstie, thank you so much for this. It's been wonderful and really useful, I think. And we will wrap it up here. But you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Kirstie. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.